Okay, hey everybody, I'm Jessica. This is Move to Amend's January 21st sit-in campaign planning call, November 18th, 2019. Thank you so much for being here. And if you're not here on this call live, thanks for tuning into the recording. I've shared in the chat the campaign packet so you can have that open while we walk through it. And I'll just go over our agenda quickly before we get into things. All right. Hello to those of you who are still joining. So what we're going to do on this call today is walk through things that should be underway for this campaign. However, if you're just getting started and feel a little behind, that's okay. There's still time to make this happen. So we'll go over those tasks and the process for asking for petition signer lists and phone banking lists and make sure everyone feels comfortable with that. And then we'll talk a little bit about lobbying because that's one of the tasks that you'll want to be working on between now and the end of the year. And I'll give you some resources about that. And then we can do any troubleshooting or specific questions you might have, especially since there's only a few of us on the call. We can do that if you have anything that you want to go over. So again, thanks for being here. If you just tuned in, the campaign packet is linked in the chat bar. And if you are new to the call, I would love to meet you. So go ahead and chat your name and location in the chat bar if you haven't been on these calls already.
Shelly Stack.
Shelly, go ahead.
I don't see anything linked in the chat.
Oh, okay. I'll link it again in case it doesn't show up for those who just came in. Thanks. Hi, Rich from Whittier. Glad to have you. There's that campaign packet. So we'll be going through that. And if I'll link it a couple times throughout the call in case there's folks who join late. Okay, so just to recap, we are in a couple weeks into this campaign. We are planning a series of sit-ins across the country in congressional offices in district for representatives in the federal House who have not yet co-sponsored HJR 48, which is the We the People Amendment, which says corporations and other artificial entities should not have constitutional rights and that money is not free speech. So we're really excited about this. We have had a lot of interest lately, kind of a spike in interest. For those of you who don't know, Move to Amend's 10-year anniversary just happened. And so we had a big party and fundraiser in the Bay Area in California that went really well. And there were over a dozen people there who signed up to be part of this campaign too. So it looks like we have even more actions going to happen. So I'm really excited to see that growing. And I know a lot of you are working and deciding what exactly you're going to do in January. Some of these actions are going to be risking arrest, and some of them will be dispersing before a risk of arrest is imminent. So you don't have to totally know yet if you are going to do an arrestable action or not, but there is time, and we'll be helping you figure that out soon. So if you look in the campaign packet, you can see that the things that should be underway to make these January 21st sit-ins make sense and have context include making daily calls to your representative's office to let them know what you want. So we need to be calling as much as possible, flooding their offices up until January 21st so that when we come in and do a sit-in, it doesn't feel random, so that they know who we are and what we want. So it feels a little bit awkward at the beginning to make a daily phone call because it's annoying, but that's what we want. So daily phone calls for you and anyone you can get to be making these calls. We also want to be sending emails to their offices. We want to make calls to both the DC and the in-district offices if possible. And social media posting, so Twitter, Facebook, some of them have Instagram, but mostly Twitter and Facebook are going to be the most effective ways to do that. So tagging them and letting them know publicly what we want them to do as well. A big thing that is should be happening right now is that you should be trying to reach out to the office and schedule a lobby visit before the end of the year. So that's you going into the office with, if you can, a couple of other constituents to meet with the district staff and let them know what you want them to do. I'm going to share later in the call some resources we have about that. If you've never done that before, sometimes it's a little intimidating, but we've got plenty of resources to help you feel confident. And if you want to walk it over on the phone, I'm happy to do more one-on-one coaching with that. So usually it takes a couple times to get a meeting scheduled, unless you have a really awesome representative who is very accountable. You've got to call a couple times to make it happen. Usually you want to speak with a scheduler, the person on the phone. Sometimes who answers the phone will be the one to schedule it, but mostly there's another person in the office who's responsible for setting those meetings. So whether or not you're a constituent, you can go in and have this meeting. Some of you are doing actions for districts that you're not a constituent of, and that's okay. It does work better if you bring a couple of constituents with you to the meeting, but it's not absolutely essential. So go ahead and make those meetings, and even if you don't have constituents to go with you yet, you have time to arrange that. So go ahead and make an appointment, keep calling them if they don't get back to you. We also should be sending email blasts to areas or supporters in the area to ask them to be making phone calls and sending emails and doing all the things that you're doing. So within the campaign packet, you will find a template for that email. All you need to do if you're a Move to Amend affiliate is to use the normal process for submitting a email blast. If you're not a Move to Amend affiliate and you don't know what I'm saying, you can send an email to affiliate-support@movetoamend.org and include the language that you want us to send out. If you see the template at the bottom of the campaign packet, you can just copy and paste that and then fill in the information. So the representative and the district, and we'll make sure that that goes out to the folks who are in our database in that district. So we're just trying to get as many people as possible to make these calls and send emails as possible. So that's the function of that. And let's see. You also are probably in the midst of arranging a phone bank. So that's when you gather folks to help you make phone calls. We call people to ask them to call the representative because more voices is better when we are making these calls. So we want to get everyone in the district who is a Move to Amend supporter to be calling their rep daily. So the phone bank is the process to get the word out to those folks to make the calls. So I'll pause here and see if there's any questions. If you want me to revisit anything that I talked about, feel free to raise your hand. Down at the bottom, there should be an option to raise hand under the participants tab, or you can chat in the chat bar, however you want to go about it, and I will try to answer your question. Okay, nothing so far, but feel free to raise your hand at any point or make a chat.
Jessica?
Yes, is that David?
Yeah, David in Great Falls, actually on a sabbatical right now to Havre, Montana, but in Montana. Hey, my question is, let's say we were willing to travel either by car or plane or train or whatever. Does J21 involve any kind of mass gatherings that are in the region or are we all each on our own to form our own little subcell and protest, sit in as an individual or with one or two other people?
Yeah, that's a good question. So if there's a district that's nearby that's not your rep that you want to connect with, we can help you get in touch with anyone who might be doing that around you. There's no central location just because of the nature of the campaign. We're starting out with these sit-ins. They're going to be happening all around the country on one day, but there's no sort of one central location to show up at. But if you're willing to travel and you think your time and presence could be more useful to someone else for a representative, I'm sure they'd be glad to have you. That's what I'll be doing too. So,
but there won't be a map of any kind where we can figure out which location is the one that's currently planned that's nearest us so we can latch onto it. That was kind of what I had in mind was if there was any kind of coordinates map or push pin map or, any kind of little icons on a map of the country where we could sort of see, oh, if I wanted to travel to a nearby sit-in, I'd be going to Washington State or something like that. It would be my nearest one that's been planned.
Totally, yes. So I do think there are specifically some things being planned in Washington. I should have I don't know if it'll be exactly a map with icons, but I'll have at least a list of where everything is by the end of this week, once I get responses from a couple people I'm waiting on. So yeah, thanks for that nudge. I will make sure that you all get that as soon as it exists so that you can coordinate, and I'll list a point person so that you know who to get in touch with in those locations.
Because, you know, there's power and also more safety in numbers.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. Yeah, great idea. Let me make myself a note here. Okay. Thanks, David. Any other questions? Okay, groovy. One reminder, so if you are organizing a phone bank and you need a list from us of the people to call in the district that you're working in, whether that's your district or one that you're helping out, when you email us for that request, it helps a lot if you can include a list of the zip codes that are included in that district. Pretty easy to find with a quick internet search, but it goes a long way in helping us get those created faster. So an ideal situation would be an email that includes all the zip codes within the district listed with a comma in between and no spaces. That just allows us to plug it into the database, and it's really easy to generate the list. If you can't do that, it's okay, we'll figure it out, but that would make my day a little easier. But no matter how that comes in, send us a request at affiliate-support@movetoamend.org, and we'll get you that list. Give us a couple days notice if you can, just because we have more requests coming in than usual.
Jessica, I'm sorry, another question. Are you saying we should, before we do that, we should take whatever steps are needed to become affiliates, whatever that means? No,
don't need to be affiliated to do this. Just let me know the zip codes that exist in the congressional district, and we can get that out of the database for you.
Okay.
Yeah. Good question though. Yeah, don't need to be a Move to Amend affiliate to make this work, for sure. Okay, and then if you are going to go on a lobby visit, I guess now is as good a time as any to go into what that looks like. One of the tools that's going to be helpful when you go into an office to lobby is to have a list of all the petition signers in that district. So we don't need to hand over everyone's address and phone number. What we do need is a list of the folks who've signed the petition. Essentially, that means you're going in as a representative of all the people, usually thousands of people, who have signed and say, we want you to do this thing. So you can be speaking on behalf of these folks. It goes a long way to put a list in front of a representative or a staffer and say, you know, these are all the names of people who I'm representing here today. So that's another reason why you might contact us for a petition signer list. If you want numbers for a phone bank, that's one thing. And if you want just names for your lobby visit, we'll get you those too. So again, give us a couple days notice at least, and we can generate that for you to print. So I'm gonna link here a web page that has some resources and tips about lobbying your representative. Got your message, thanks Ambrosia. That would be great. So this webpage here is for the general lobbying page for 2019. So if you want to watch that YouTube video that's linked there, that's the webinar for the general lobbying in 2019. But if you scroll down on the webpage, you can see some tips about pre-meeting preparation. So the things you want to bring with you, there's things here you can print out that include the language of the amendment. So that's really important to go in so that they know exactly what they would be co-sponsoring. A list of frequently asked questions that come up a lot, including, you know, why do we need to abolish this or that? Or why do we care about anything besides money and politics? Or how do unions feel about this? Including some talking points there. There's an amendment comparison. So you may know that there are other amendments in Congress right now that sound a little bit like ours. So you can see why, you know, how you might talk to somebody about the other amendments. And you can give them this document. I found it really helpful in lobby meetings to make the case for why our amendment is actually the most thorough one and the one that they should support. And then a comprehensive piece about why we need to abolish all corporate constitutional rights and not just like the First Amendment, which is what most people talk about when they have an understanding of this. So it's really important that they understand why, but also don't let that freak you out. If you feel like you're not an expert on it or don't have all the answers, that's okay. It's totally fine to say to a staffer that you'll get back to them about something, or, you know, I'm a new volunteer, I'm not sure, but I will let you know. That's that doesn't disqualify you at all from being a good advocate. So if you feel intimidated by the level of like information you need to have, you don't need to have it. But these resources will help you feel like you have a little more of a grasp on it. And I recommend printing them all and bringing them with you if you can. So when you go in for a lobby visit, usually you'll meet with a low-level staffer, especially the first time in district. Again, it's good to have a constituent with you if you're not a constituent, just so you can represent the people that they most care about. And to start with some story. You know, most of us who are here and care about this issue have some personal reason why this matters to us. You know, for me, my hometown was destroyed by a corporation that has no consequences. And, you know, the effects of climate change in California and fires and all of that, like, it's a pretty compelling story. So if you have some sort of personal narrative that you can begin with, that goes a long way. But even if you don't, that's okay. You know, you can represent the reason why this is important from so many different angles, whether that's, you know, climate change or any sort of justice that you care about, there's an in there. So if you need help working that story and kind of massaging that into something that feels like it's authentic, if you want to practice that, let me know. So there's a script here down the webpage of the things you might keep in mind when you're asking for a meeting. Again, it doesn't need to be super formal. If you want a meeting with your representative, you're entitled to that, right? They work for us in theory. So feel empowered that it's totally within your rights and responsibility, really, to go and meet with your representative and tell them what you want them to do and what you care about. And then there's an email script for the same thing and some meeting tips. So again, just general things to have the most successful meeting. You want to stay on topic and avoid rambling. They usually give you, 15 minutes, sometimes less if they're not super, interested in this topic. Sometimes I've had hour-long lobby meetings. It really depends. So hard to say when you go in, but it's good to have your points listed before you go in so that you can stay on topic. And then you want to ask for their ideas. So how do you feel about this? Maybe you're in a district where you've got a hardcore Republican who loves Citizens United. That's interesting to know, right? So maybe you can pull out from them how they feel about it. That goes a long way. And then if there's things that you feel like you could follow up on to correct some of their thinking or to answer any questions they have, take notes in the meeting so that you can make sure to get back to them. And of course, with any organizing, follow-up is 90% of the work. So when the meeting's over, we've got this online reporting form to let us know of the results so that we can help you if you need help following up or need materials that were asked for, fill that out. And we'll do a report back on these calls too. If anyone's had a lobby meeting, we'll ask you to share a little bit if you want to. And if you can, take a picture. I know it sounds kind of cheesy, but it's really nice to get a picture with a staffer. They're used to that. They do it all the time. You could just ask, the administrative person in the office to take your picture with a staffer you meet with. It's fun to collect those and will help us in our social media part of the campaign too. So, of course, you want to send a follow-up afterwards. Thanks for meeting with me. Here's what I promised you. And anything else that was talked about in the meeting that you committed to. And then, of course, let us know if we need to do anything on our part from National. Again, lobby packet materials, list of co-sponsors, so who's currently on the bill. There's a Dear Colleague letter from our lead sponsor, Pramila Jayapal. She is a Washington representative, and she wrote a letter to other congressional offices requesting that they come on. And then a couple of other resources about constitutional rights. There's talking points for conservatives. So if you're meeting with a Republican or even a more conservative Democrat, that might be good to have with you. So check all that out. There's lots of resources down at the bottom. I know this seems like a lot, but you can totally do it. And if you haven't before, I think you'll find it really empowering when you go in and do that for the first time. So the idea here is to have a lobby meeting by the end of 2019, which often requires several phone calls to make happen. If they say they can't do it before the end of the year, it's okay to push a little bit. Sometimes a more strong request can get the job done, but if not, it should happen before January 21st. So let them know that you're representing a coalition and you want to make sure to get a hold of them on your timeline. Usually they can figure something out. It's unusual that they won't be able to see you if you give them enough notice, which now you have time to do. Let's see. So I'll pause there and see if there are any questions about lobbying and or if anyone wants to share an experience or a tip that you have from your own experience lobbying.
Well, I have one if nobody else is going to raise their hand, but I've already said two things, so I figured I'd let other people go first.
That's nice of you. I don't see other hands at this point, but so why don't you go ahead, and if others want to speak, you can either unmute yourself or raise your hand. Go ahead.
Okay, sure. And I'm coming in clear?
Yes.
All right. So there we go. So I recently got involved, in the movement and sat in on the 2 or 3 state calls, Montana moved to amend calls. And we just recently in our last state legislative session lost a House bill vote. It was just a resolution type vote, wouldn't have been binding or anything, but it got voted strongly out of committee, like 16-3 to reach the floor, and then lost like 53-49 or something like that in the actual vote. And so I was asking, well, why did it lose? And it turns out that the Chamber of Commerce got involved at the last minute and began, sowing some doubt in our little tiny, low budget state, right, with very few people and lots of land and very a lot of small businesses. Like individuals are actually business owners. And because the bill had been crafted very, shall we say, almost extremistly, right, to explicitly deny any of citizens' rights to businesses, a lot of small business owners and people doing DBA type businesses began to freak out that they wouldn't be able to influence or lobby properly. And 2 critical votes, that had voted yes in committee suddenly were no votes. And it's always very close around here, but that was enough to tank the bill this year. And I finally got the guy on the phone who was a Republican who wants to see something pass. And he explained to me why it was that this extreme kind of language, like all businesses will have no rights as citizens do, is essentially inimical to getting things to pass in close votes in states like Montana. And I was going to just check and see, is there a standard? Come back to that. Here's why we're being so, extremely dogmatic about that. Or are we ready to compromise to get state legislatures to pass bills?
It's a really good question. So the thing about that we need to make sure comes across is that after the amendment passes, there's a lot of statutory rights that need to be given to corporations. So we don't think that corporations shouldn't be able to operate or do business or sue or anything like that, but constitutional rights is a very extreme way to give corporations those rights. Those need to be legislated, right? So that's a legislative process and not a constitutional right. And so the reason that it needs to be so comprehensive is because if we allow loopholes in a constitutional amendment, that's where we really shoot ourselves in the foot. So we're not at a point where we compromise. The constitutional rights should be stripped from all artificial entities, and then it's up to us to legislate those rights into being. So in terms of small business owners too, you could tell stories about how, for instance, there's a small rural town in Northern California who passed a county-wide initiative. It's a very localized economy, and they didn't want Walmart coming into their community. Small business owners were opposed to Walmart moving in. And Walmart, having 14th Amendment rights under the Constitution, sued because they said, we have we have the right to not be discriminated against. You can't tell Dave he can't move into, this town. You can't tell Walmart that either. So small business owners were overrun by the rule of like this giant corporation who had 14th Amendment rights. So it's really not about, it's really in the best interest of small business owners to be able to protect themselves, from giant corporations using those rights. So if you want, I can get you some more information about and maybe some talking points about how to discuss that. But mostly I'd say, there's a lot of statutory rights that should be given to corporations, but constitutional rights are not necessary for protecting them.
Great. Okay. Yeah, because I think I'm going to use this connection. I don't know if it counts as a lobby visit because this was just a phone call I had, but I'm going to get an introduction to whoever is the new executive director of the state Chamber of Commerce, who, I'm going to be quite frank with him that, I'm working, on behalf of Move to Amend. It's also a true statement that I've been asked to run to represent my local district. I'm going to lose because I'm in a Republican district. I'm not going to win that, but I will potentially be able to bring some issues to light. And I want to, find out from someone who's on the other side what language would they would find acceptable, right? So that they wouldn't go in and try to torpedo votes if language was construed as statutory versus, legislative or whatever, procedural. I mean, it would be nice to have that language to sort of offer up as an olive branch during that upcoming meeting I have, or I think I'm going to get. Absolutely.
Yeah, that makes good sense. And congrats on considering running for office. It's really important to have candidates who understand whether they'll win or not.
Not a done deal yet, Jessica, but
well,
they're going to try to booze me and ply me with liquor and stuff. So we'll see if it works.
Okay, gotcha. Well, that's awesome. And it's important to have candidates running who understand. So I'll throw in my yay for that. I just linked in the chat a document that says why abolish all corporate constitutional rights. That's a place to start, and I'll see if I can get you something that might fit your situation even better.
All right, I'm reading it now. Thank you.
Cool. Thanks, David. Okay. Hey, Janice. Good to see you. Okay. Anyone else want to share or have questions so far? Okay. So let's see where we're at now. So next week, let's talk about next steps. Right now you're making calls, trying to get everyone to flood these offices as much as possible in every direction. Next week, you want to begin to assemble your team. So if you're an affiliate, you've got a pool of people who might be able to be part of that team. Remember that you don't necessarily have to be the one to be arrested. There's a lot of roles within this campaign that need to be filled. So there's, if you're going to do an arrestable action, there are those people, but there are also support people, media people. This is not to say you need a team of 20 people to make this happen, but it's to say that there are a lot of roles that you can fill. Even if someone is hesitant to be the one to do the sit-in, there's a place for them still. So next week is a good time to start concretizing who are going to be the folks to do the sit-in, whether you're arrestable or not. Remember that if you are thinking of risking arrest, which you don't have to know quite yet, it's best to have 2 people of each gender represented, so that if you end up going far enough in the arrest process that you get booked, that they will have a buddy in the system. So, they eventually separate by gender. So it's good to have at least 2 people of each to do it together. So these can be people who are Move to Amend supporters or who are kind of brand new to this. So for instance, my mother-in-law just got excited about the idea of getting arrested for Move to Amend. She's not a hardcore Move to Amender or anything, but she thinks it's right. And so she approached me and said, I don't know, maybe this is something that I would consider. So that's great. If this is people's point of entry, that's a great way to start. Or if they're seasoned Move to Amend activists, that's great too. This might be something in your phone bank that you could make notes about. So when you make all of these calls to supporters in your area or in the district, if someone feels really excited about it, when you talk to them and they're like, got some energy around it, you might mention to them that you're still building a team. Get the word out there as you're talking to people to ask them to make calls, get a feel for if people have a lot of energy and ask them to be a part of the the event itself. We can talk more about that if you want. You know your community, so like I said, you'll have a better idea of who these people might be, but also know, like we said earlier, if you think that this sit-in would be better in a district that is not directly where you live and you want to help another district, I'll have a list of where these events are happening soon, so you can plug in if you feel like you're better to support than to do something in your own district. Let's see. You can also send an email blast to the supporters in your area specifically asking if anyone wants to be part of the sit-in team. So you're going to be sending emails asking them to make calls. You could also send another email specifically asking for that sort of participation. So in terms of the action itself, I know a lot of people are still on the fence about if you want to be risking arrest or not. You don't need to know quite yet, but we do want to start hammering that out. So begin to decide if that's something that you want to. I do hope that we can have a few arrestable actions. I know that we're looking at probably 5 right now, but sometimes those things fade or people change their minds. I would really like to have, a good handful of folks who are willing to risk arrest for this. That helps us get the severity across and also helps us a lot with media. But remember, if you're going to go do an action that will disperse before the risk of arrest, that is ideally a stepping stone to an arrestable action later on. So the idea would be that you go to this office, you disperse before they arrest you, but you put them on notice that next time you're coming back, you're not going to leave as easily. So keep in mind that this is an escalation, right? Hey, Mark, good to see you. Okay, David's question, will there be someone at affiliate support armed with legal knowledge about what infractions are considered felonies versus misdemeanors? So we do not have a specific person who can provide that information. We've got some resources. We're encouraging folks to reach out to local National Lawyers Guild chapters and ACLU. Because this is so, there's so many variables and it depends on where you are and what sort of property you're on. We, for liability reasons, can't offer that level of legal support. So I'm sorry about that. I wish we could. We don't quite have the capacity for that at this time. I think that felony is not something we need to worry about. I have done a lot of reading about, and a lot of us on our team have experience with this, and I don't think that's a concern. We're looking at like a misdemeanor situation here, but I will say that we don't have someone that you're talking about, like who's armed with all the nuances of this. So I apologize. That would be great in the future. So right now we're trying to work with folks at NLG to try to get as much legal support as we can. But that is going to come down to you doing some research and connecting with folks in your area. Let's see. Okay, so I guess I'll pause here, see if there are other questions. If anyone wants to share how things are going, are you making calls? How is that being received? Do you have a team yet, or anything else that you want to talk about your own experience? Okay, well, that's okay. We're still in the very early phases, and please note, if you're feeling a little behind, it's okay. You still have time, and we are coming up on the holidays, so there might be folks out of office more than normal, and keep that in mind that people will be traveling and stuff. So I think this week is a good time to start, making those calls and kind of hitting it hard before next week people kind of leave for a few days. Yeah, and Tim says your local NLG can provide legal advice. Totally.
Hey, Jess.
Yes.
So again, I was waiting to see if anybody else wanted to pipe in because I don't like to dominate here, but I did go to a meet and greet the politician the other day at a local bar here in Great Falls. This is a guy who's trying to win the Democratic nomination to unseat Daines, to turn Montana into an all-blue state for 2020 from a senatorial perspective. And it was really good because I was the only one there. I mean, there was another person when I showed up, but they took off right away because they'd been the only one there. So for 45 minutes, I had this, dark horse senatorial candidate's ear. And I had described to him why I felt, that this was a fundamental kind of, level zero issue, right, for any other issue, because of the likelihood that big money is going to come in and, torpedo your other issue, right, if you don't get this one on the books first. And I told him about the pledge, and this guy's name was John Muse, and I think I sent a message into Ambrosia about looking for his name, because he wasn't real gung-ho about signing it, but and that's only because he'd had some blow up in his face in a previous campaign with pledges or something like that. But I did get, just since you're asking about interactions, I did get a nice 40-minute block of time with this guy to just sort of shoot the whatever, and go back and forth. And he had got a chance to ask me all kinds of questions about why I thought it was so important. And I was able to sort of draw kind of lines between his pet issues and the corporate interests that would likely defeat those pet issues if Citizens United remained on the books. And I felt it was good practice. And I felt I was very lucky because there was nobody else around that I felt like I needed to give time to.
Yeah.
Off. I just was able to dominate and monopolize him for 40 minutes.
That's amazing. So what a unique opportunity.
So if MUES, if John Muse ends up as the Democratic candidate, I don't know if he'll pledge or not, but at least know he got 40 minutes of Dave Saslav time campaign in Montana.
Excellent. That's awesome. Wow. I've never heard of someone having so much one-on-one time. That's awesome.
I wasn't expecting it, but I got it.
Yeah. That's the ultimate bird dog opportunity right there.
Right.
That's great. Okay. Well, thanks for sharing. Anyone else? Okay.
Mark?
Yeah, go ahead, Mark.
I don't know if I mentioned it in the last meeting. I think I might have, but I actually had one of our U.S. Senate candidates call me personally, and he's running to replace. He's running for a seated senator who's running for re-election this time. We have another seat open that's going to be vacated early, and that's coming up as well, but he's not running for that seat. At any rate, I had a similar experience as far as he was kind of reluctant to go to the pledge. His response was that if I do a pledge for one person, then everybody and their brother wants me to pledge for something, and I know the guy agrees with what we're talking about, but I think he's looking at it from his political, the impact it would have on him as a candidate running at this point in time in a ultra conservative state. So that's all. I just wanted to mention that it was a unique. I gave money to this candidate, and so he was going through his list of donors looking to get more money, and he was actually personally making phone calls. So I thought that was interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great opportunity. Wow. Okay, so this is interesting to hear people's responses to the pledge. I'm curious if others have had that response too. You can let them know too. I understand what you're saying about. I guess if you take one pledge, you got to take them all. But I don't know. I feel like maybe that's a little bit of a cop-out, right? So we will be people who decline to respond will be published that way, and I don't know how that sounds better to them than taking the pledge, but you can remind them that over 85% of people agree with this, so it's a pretty safe bet across the political spectrum. So
I think if it may have just been a little off guard that he was caught and he wasn't really ready to make any kind of a commitment, and so this was just kind of like I think a knee-jerk response. So, but he also knows Al Herman, who's part of our affiliate, and spoken with Al at length in the past. So he wasn't exactly a stranger either. So, yeah.
Gotcha.
So anyway, I think with time he may come along.
Gotcha. Yeah, that makes sense. If he was on his fundraising game and then he all of a sudden had to commit to a pledge or not, I guess I could be caught off guard too. But that's good. Well, that's, relationships really matter. So good on you all for being out there, and at least he knows who you are.
Just the question I was expecting from this guy, John Muse, but I didn't get, was who else has signed it?
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to arm myself with the names of the signers, and I guess I don't have access to that list because I guess it's in a database somewhere when people sign the pledge. But I was wondering, is it possible to get a current snapshot of, say, regionally or within a state of who's on board as candidates or incumbents?
Totally. So the pledge for this year, we refresh each year. So those who have pledged in the past don't get re-upped automatically, but the link I just shared is this year so far. That'll extend through 2020. So we're expecting much more. But there's a state-by-state breakdown there. Of course, there are more pledges in states where there are more organizers. So that's the...
Well, that should be good enough. That should work. Thank you.
Okay, cool. Yeah, no problem. And we try to update that a couple times a week. So it's pretty current, thanks to Ambrosia. Okay, let's see. Any other questions at this point? Okay, so next steps: building your team, making a lobby visit happen, continuing to make these phone calls and emails, asking everyone you know to do it. Let's see. Thinking more about a potential arrestable situation. If you need pep talks or anyone to try to convince anyone of, risking arrest, let me know. I'm happy to do that. And our next call is going to be December 2nd. Make sure I'm telling you the correct thing here. Monday after next, excuse me. And we'll check in. And remember, the campaign packet has a breakdown of each week, the tasks you want to be doing. If you're not totally up to date, if you haven't made a phone bank happen or whatever, it's okay if it's a little bit off. That is acting, of course, as a guideline or suggestions for the way to get in all the tactics that we need to get in before the 21st of January. But if you're a little off schedule, don't feel like you're, completely derailed. You've got time to do this. And again, let us know with a couple days notice if you need a petition signer list or a phone bank list for the folks in district. And you can email me directly, jessica@movetoamend.org, with questions. Or if you want to set up a phone call or something like that, even if you wanted to do a conference call or something, if you've got others who want to talk about it, let me know. Otherwise, requests for email blasts or lists should go to affiliate-support@movetoamend.org. And like I said, it's super helpful if you include the zip codes that are in the district. Just saves us a little bit of homework. How are we feeling? Because I'm feeling really stoked about this. Like I said, had at least a dozen new people raise their hand enthusiastically at our fundraiser on November 10th. And there's energy here. So holiday calls are often pretty small calls, but I think we've got a really good group doing this. And it's okay if you're still feeling a little hesitant. We'll figure it out. Okay. Okay, well, I want to make sure that I gave you all the resources I promised. I'm going to be sending an email tonight or tomorrow with this call recording and the resources that we talked about. I'll also include the Interfaith Caucus talking points. I know there was a couple folks who had asked for talking points about churches and coming from a more interfaith perspective. So I'll send those too. If there's any other things that you need to help you answer questions, let me know. We have tons of written material, so I can send you anything that I can find to help you answer questions.
Jess, is J21 just going to pop out of the woodwork at people as a surprise, or is there some kind of rolling marketing, rolling thunder kind of build up to J21 plan where there's going to be some articles in magazines or national magazines or websites like Slate or whatever, and then it'll be like people will be looking for J21?
That's a good question. So most of the media will probably happen just after, like the day after, just because that tends to get more attention than coming up on it, but there will be media coming up on it. The idea is that the action itself, the tactic is a surprise to the representatives, but they won't be surprised because you will have called them 100 million times beforehand. So we can talk more about that in terms of like districts and what works best for each community. My goal is to get out some press releases and blurbs and maybe even an article or two beforehand. But most of the media hit will come directly after. And that's why we're going to plan for a second action a month or two following January 21st to capture that momentum as well. So that's the plan.
Can you kind of, I think, probably sense where I'm heading with that? I mean, I think for every shepherd, there's 500 sheep, right? And if I could, like, say, post I don't know, some kind of article or press release or something that made it clear to all my followers on Facebook that there's an organization behind this. And this is one another of Dave's half-cocked ideas, right? And let's all go get arrested. What fun that will be, right? I mean, that I think would be much more likely to garner followers and adherents than just me sort of, telling people that there's this thing happening. You know what I mean?
Totally. Yes. The idea is to frame this as there's a national day of civil disobedience that's happening. So as you're saying, it's not just about like this one-off thing, but there are all of these actions happening around the country, and look what came out of it. Then all these people got arrested. But certainly, especially for the sake of your own advertising and media and what you're going to do, you can totally represent the coalition and make it known that this is a national day of action.
Okay.
That includes, Dave's plan to get arrested. It's a great piece of it. So we'll be probably soon we'll have some press release stuff. You don't want to send press releases too far in advance because then you get lost, but it's in the campaign plan that I think the week or maybe even 2 weeks before it happens to start sending press releases. But the day after press releases are the, the main point, especially if there's an arrest, because we want to get pictures and everything that comes out of that to go along with it. So we'll talk more about that as we go, but I'll make sure you've got a template at least for a press release pretty soon.
Okay, thank you.
Sure thing. All right, we good to go? You can do this. Okay, I will talk to you 2 weeks from today, same time, same place. But if you have questions in the meantime, hit me up. And otherwise, have a really great harvest holiday. And let me know if you have any questions in the meantime.
Thanks, Jessica.
Yeah, sure thing. Thank you all so much for being here. Take care.
Bye.